named Novell Vibe Granite. Now, I would also emphasize that Vibe is a key part of our overall collaboration strategy with supporting Novell Groupwise. Groupwise is our primary collaborative tool. Obviously, been around for a lot of years. I'm a core Groupwise user, as hopefully many on the phone are. Vibe is a great tool that supports and enhances and integrates well with Groupwise, along with Novell Messenger. There's a lot of exciting things happening with Messenger. Since the Attachmate acquisition, we've added several resources there, and that product is improving and moving forward as well. So it's part of a whole collaborative story with Novell Vibe, Groupwise, and Novell Messenger. Now, this is a slide that I always show, and we're seeing this as the continued theme for Vibe with our customers. So Vibe is a next-generation collaborative platform that combines the best of these 5 categories: document management, knowledge repository, project collaboration, advanced workflows and custom forms or process automation, and then collaborative or social intranets. It's an on-premise-based solution. It has high levels of security and integrates really well with Groupwise. The things that I've done a little bit different on this slide is I've highlighted the first 2 items there on the left, document management and project collaboration. We see that those 2 are the core drivers and interest in Novell Vibe. Most customers are looking for easier ways to manage their documents, to version them, to track them, maybe to put life cycles on them, policies, and Vibe does a lot of that stuff very well. A lot of customers are also looking for ways to enhance how they do collaboration around projects, better task management, better communication, better support of participants through multiple devices. You got the mobile users, you've got the disconnected users, all those things. So document management and project collaboration are definitely the 2 core drivers. But what usually happens is when customers get into a proof of concept, they see how Vibe can become their social or collaborative intranet. And that's why that on the right is bolded and underlined, because even though document management and project collaboration are typically the initial drivers, the end result for customers is often that Vibe becomes their collaborative intranet or their new intranet. Some of the key features that are available in Vibe is we provide a very broad set of information types and features. When we say information types, we're referring to the hundreds of different document formats that we support. When we say we support them, we index them, make them searchable, we version them, and make them accessible and can secure them. We support a lot of other types of information types like wikis, discussions, blogs, photos, calendars, tasks, and we also provide the ability to customize forms to meet unique business needs. You can easily brand and customize the look and feel. I'll give some examples there. I've touched on document management and workflows. Vibe has social elements with profiles, searching, and tagging. You'll see some examples of that. The thing that we are hearing over and over again is, especially compared to the competition, is the ease of setup, the flexibility of setup, and the overall management. Vibe is an extremely cost-effective tool with a very broad set of features and functionalities, and we're hearing that more and more from our customer base. The resource library is a great self-help tool. I'll show some examples of that. And then we've got a lot of APIs. Vibe has, Novell sponsors an open source project for Vibe. So not only are there a lot of APIs to tie into and integrate with Vibe, but you see the majority of the code that Vibe is built on. And then very robust access controls. This is just a screenshot of the sample user interface. I'm going to go past that one quickly. So we have activity streams, a way of keeping current on Vibe, a brief history. About a year ago in June, we released version 3.1. Improved a lot of capabilities around task management. Landing pages is a key feature that was introduced a few years ago. We made a number of improvements there, improvements around what's new, improvements around search, and then we added some functionality that tied Vibe into a previous product known as Sitescape Forum. And so those are a few of the high-level things that were done back on version 3.1. You'll notice that the name of the product about a year ago was called Vibe On-Prem. Shortly after Attachmate came in, we decided to consolidate our Vibe platforms, and so that name has been simplified to just Novell Vibe. Version 3.1 included a number of improvements for task management, and this is just a screenshot of a task folder. So a lot new capabilities that came out in 3.1 with subtasks, task ordering, simple dependencies, and other types of functionality. As a result of that release, many of our products here at Novell have actually moved to Vibe to help us manage our internal rollout and development of our projects and product release cycles. And a lot of that is due to the improvements that were made around task management. Vibe 3.2 is where we consolidated the name and started that initial step of bringing our Vibes together. It came out in the mid-November of last year. Big improvements around versioning management. I'll give an example of that today. We added some new simple mobile apps, as well as updated our existing mobile user interface. That was the release that we first introduced the betas of the Vibe desktop and the Office integrations, and that's where I'll spend most of my demonstration time today on, as those are going to be part of our 3.3 release. We continue to focus on usability and landing page improvements. We introduced a new connector for Groupwise and Vibe that allows you to synchronize calendars and tasks from Vibe into Groupwise. And of course, that release also focused on quality and performance. This is a screenshot that just touches on the mobile app that was introduced in November. They're there for iPhone, iOS, and Android devices. If you don't have one of those devices, and if you access Vibe through, for example, I use a BlackBerry, then you'll see that the mobile interface has been updated on the right two screens. So the left screen is the mobile app on the iOS and Android, and then that app makes it simple to launch into Vibe, and then you experience the updated mobile interface there on the two right screens. Now, Vibe Granite, or version 3.3, is the release that's coming out here. We expect to release it by the end of May. I've put May, June here. It's very much on track. We're already in beta. We're getting ready to upgrade our internal systems to this release here in the next couple of weeks. The major drivers for this release is the new Vibe add-in, which provides really nice integrations with Microsoft Office 2010 and 2007 on Windows. We're also introducing the Vibe Desktop, which provides file synchronization and offline access on Windows, with a Mac desktop available just 2 to 3 months after the release of version 3.3. We've also added a number of improvements around landing pages, again, because the collaborative intranet is the major theme that we're seeing with our customers, or the driver for them. Every release, we're always adding updates and new capabilities around landing pages, and those are some of the high-level things that are provided there. We added table of contents on wikis. That's been a long-standing request, and then a couple of simple things. We simplified the ability to move and copy multiple items within certain folder types. And then I'll get into some of the demo. Any questions so far, Q?
Let's see. Not yet. It doesn't look like we have anything yet. So, yeah.
And I know that was kind of a lightning summary, and that was intentionally, so I apologize if that was too fast. I've done a lot of these webinars with Q and his team, and I wanted to spend more time focusing on the demos. That's been some of the feedback that I've gotten. What I've done here is I'm sharing my browser. Hopefully you can see that there. I'm starting on the Novell web page. Want to highlight a couple of things that I emphasize on every webinar. I'm going to the Vibe product page, and I'm clicking on the Resource Library tab. The Resource Library continues to be an excellent source of sample information, sample forms, workflows, workspaces, and we're just recently starting a series of webinars that show very detailed how to build some of the examples that we have available out on the Vibe Resource Library and on the Sandbox. The Sandbox you can get to from the Resource Library, just right here it says Sandbox. When you click on that, and now I've already logged in, so you can see I've logged in here as Tracy Smith. The URL is tryvibeonprem.novell.com. That's the current URL. When you're in the Sandbox, you have access to lots of different things. I'm going to go here and click on the Resource Library tab. Now, the resource library from the product website is also provided here in a live version of Vibe. So I'm no longer on the Novell website. If I was to go back over to the Novell website, whoops, and go into the product page, click on the resource library tab. Here I'm on the Novell website. I'm looking at the resource library. What we've done is we've taken a lot of the information here, and we've also made that available out on the virtual sandbox. Now, the great thing that's been done since the last webinar I've done is we have added a lot of many new sample workspaces. This is the area, again, speaking to people using Vibe as a social or collaborative internet. We've had some workspaces that have been available for a long time. This Abraham Lincoln Academy we've had out there for a couple of years. We've added this sample engineering workspace, a sample law firm workspace, support team sample workspace. Lately, we've done a number of things around education, providing a set of education sample workspaces. So there's one for the classroom, here's one for a student area, and one for a teacher area. We've also added some other just very simple landing pages. Here's one that just is like a county information page. All of these are intended to be examples to show ways that you or your customers may be able to get the most out of Novell Vibe. We've added some human resources sample pages. We've had a team in the Netherlands create some templates that are specific to the iPad. There's some things in the Netherlands around local governments, and the team there has created a series of templates, and we've made them available out here in the sandbox. Again, you can imagine if this is an iPad, it makes for very simple navigation to different elements of Vibe, really tailored to accessing it from an iPad or tablet device. Now, on top of those examples, we have some others that are available. Project management is an area that we see a lot of customers using Vibe for, so we've provided a sample workspace out there. We've seen some of our own sales teams in Novell really accelerate their use of Vibe. Our team helped them create some workspaces, so we made a template out of that and provided that out here as another example. There's a number of workspaces that are under construction, and then we're building, I said, a series of webinars where we're actually showing people how to build the samples that we've provided. The one that I clicked on here was the workspace that was very quickly built from a webinar that happened a couple of weeks ago. The objective here is to show people how easy and quick it is to create a workspace from scratch. And this very basic workspace that's being shown here was literally built live in the webinar within 30 minutes. We took that webinar and we divided it up into two segments. One segment that shows exactly how to build a workspace and the use case that it would be used for. And then the second webinar takes that workspace that we built and we polish it, refine it, add more content to it, and give a more use case example of how people might use that. So there's a lot of things happening between the sandbox and the resource library, and I would encourage you, if you haven't gone out and take a look, to go out and take a look. All right, so with that said, let's touch on some of the major areas of focus for the version 3.3 release. I'm going to start off with the Vibe desktop. And an example of that, the Vibe desktop is a simple application that I've installed here on my computer. And this is the desktop console. A lot of people relate this to iFolder. And what I've done is I've taken, when I installed this, which just takes a couple of minutes, one of the first things I do is I connect it to a Vibe system. So I've already done that. I've gone out and given my the system I've connected to a name. I call it Try Vibe. This is the URL I'm connecting to. That is the same URL that we're showing out here on the sandbox, right there. I type in my username and credentials. It shows me, I can get quick access to my profile. It shows me the quota, how much I've used of my quota. Once I've connected to my system through the desktop, then I can identify which workspaces or folders I want to synchronize. So in this case, I'm just connecting to my personal workspace. If I wanted to add other workspaces, I just select the Add button. It allows me to navigate through Vibe as if it was a file system. My options are my personal workspace, my teams, and my favorites. If I look at my personal workspace, it shows that I have a calendar, blog, files. If I go out to Vibe and I look at my personal workspace there, I can see that I have the same set of folder options here on the left, including Tracy's demo and This Is My Project. And those are also showing here. If I don't want to sync to my workspace, if I want to connect to one of the teams I work in, then I select the My Teams option. Again, if I'm in Vibe and I look under My Teams, I can see that there's my list of teams, and that list here is mimicked by the list that that's available here. I can select one of those particular teams I want to synchronize to, select OK, and then that team is then added to the set of folders or workspaces that are then synced to my desktop. I'm going to not do that. Once I've selected all the workspaces and folders that I want synced to my desktop, then I come in and identify where on my desktop I want that stored in. So it's very simple. I just want it stored on my user drive called Vibe. If I click on the icon, it opens that up very quickly, and you can see it goes right to my user, my desktop, try Vibe, and then I can get to the workspace which I've synced to. And that workspace has 4 folders that have files in it, and those files are being synchronized to my desktop. Simple recent activities just shows the activities that are going on, and then I have system alerts. So as an example of one of the ways that I use Vibe, this morning I took a picture just right outside my office, and on my photo album I have an email address set up on my photo album. So from my BlackBerry phone, I'm taking the picture. I'm doing this while we're talking. I've taken the picture outside my office, and I'm going to email this in to Vibe. And it's going to go into my photo album. And while I'm talking, depending on how the systems are timed, we're going to see that the recent activity here on my desktop is going to get updated. I'm going to slide this down. I'm going to get a notification that my desktop has been updated. Let me change the size of my browser. And I'm going to go to my personal photo album here in my workspace, just kind of see how this is working. So right now I just said looking outside my office. Here's the picture right here outside my office. This is the picture that I just barely updated. And that's looking outside of my office is about an hour ago. Now that's gone right directly into Vibe as I posted it from my BlackBerry device. And we're looking here on the desktop. I'll synchronize the desktop now. We'll see that the desktop will synchronize. There's a notification that file's been added. If I then open that up and went out to my desktop, looked at the photo album, and looked at one of the images that I just added, there's the one I just added. So that's just a simple example of many ways that you might be able to use Vibe. You can relate this to not just a standpoint of a picture and a photo, but I use this same functionality when I am traveling. A few weeks ago, I was in South America. I posted some of the pictures from my trip there. I was in Bogota. I was down in Lima, Peru. And I often meet with customers and partners, and they have suggestions around our products. And that could be Vibe, Groupwise, Messenger, Mobility, Data Sync. And I use the same functionality to capture those comments. I post it into a folder that we use to manage our backlog. That goes directly into a task folder in Vibe. If I have any documents I need associated with that, those documents are automatically posted in Vibe. And in the case that they have a document or a file, if I'm selecting that as something I want to synchronize to my desktop, that synchronization automatically happens in the background without me knowing. And the same is true for any team members. So anyone who may be following or tracking these same folders or workspaces, they'll have the advantage of being able to connect to and always have the latest and greatest documents as they're on the go. The desktop itself, there's really not much more than what I've showed you here. It's a very simple install. It's a very simple setup. If there are any connectivity or system errors, then those are shown here on the system alerts. When we do updates, the updates are also very simple and straightforward. And like I said earlier on, if once we've released in the May timeframe, we'll also be providing a Mac desktop within just 2 or 3 months after the release of version 3.3. Any questions, Q, about the Vibe desktop?
We did have a few that came through. Let's see. Let me go down here. Let's see. Can I select for a file download on the web interface of Vibe more than one file/entry at a time?
For file download, if you're working directly from Vibe, you cannot do that today from Vibe. So for example, you couldn't select multiple entries and say, open these up right now. If you're referring to the Vibe desktop, you select the folder and everything within that folder is synchronized to the desktop. And so whether it's a single entry or multiple entries, all of the files associated with that folder are synchronized.
Okay, perfect. The next one is Mac support for Vibe Office plugin on the roadmap?
It's on the roadmap, but it's not going to be in 2012 or even early 2013. So in a moment here, I'll highlight the great new Office add-in that we've got. It is Windows only, and we do plan to address Mac and even Openoffice at a later time, but it's not something that we're immediately focused on next.
Okay, let's see. A few other ones. Will Vibe interact with the user's home directory file system?
It can if the administrator sets it up. It's not going to interact with all the same level of access controls today. One of the things that we have on the roadmap is for Vibe, I think what the user's question is, we're very much aware of the need to tie Vibe into native file systems. If I understand the question, it's our intent to tie that into users' home drive, their profiles, and all their existing credentials and rights without having to make substantial changes within the file system. Unfortunately, we don't have that today with all the capabilities I just said. An administrator can connect Vibe to an existing file system through something we call mirrored folders. But I think the nature of the question, I don't think we're quite at the point that they're asking yet.
Okay. Let's see. Let's go through a few more here. Will Vibe have an option to force users to log into Vibe Desktop for users who share a PC at home?
We don't have an option to force you to log in. Now, let's see. If it's a shared PC, you're basically saying that it doesn't want to auto log in. I think that's what the comment is. Yeah. If I go to my, if not, then just feel free to ask the question again. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out where that option is. I am not sure. I think the question is, if I'm on a shared PC, do we want the Vibe Desktop to auto log in? This version I'm using is a month old. I don't know if we have that. So that's a great, great point.
Okay. Then a few others. Is it possible to limit what gets synced in either direction?
The way that you limit is based on the directory that you select. So for example, you couldn't select a folder or a workspace and then say, I want to sync that except for these 10 files. You can't do that today.
Okay. And then let's see, the other one is, how does document management work?
Document management. So that is a loaded question. Vibe does a lot with document management. Let me actually click on my files folder here. And one of the things that we added in the version, actually go back to my presentation. One of the things we added in this release, version 3.2, is we did a lot around improving and enhancing document management. For example, we added the ability to turn off versioning So today, Vibe automatically versions everything that you modify, every file that you modify. That can create a ton of versions in disk space. And so we added the ability on some folders to be able to turn that off. We also added the ability to put a limit on the number of minor versions, and I'm going to demonstrate that here in a minute, as well as putting an age limit or time limit on those versions. So I'm in Vibe. I'm on my personal workspace out here under the Files folder. Here again, I'm just out in the sandbox. I've selected, just go back through so you know where I selected. Under the Folders menu, I've selected Configure Views, and I've gone out here to this new tab called Versioning and File Folder Settings. Here, it automatically inherits the settings from any parent folders and workspaces. I can stop that inheritance. I can say the maximum number of versions I'd like is only 2. Or I can put a date limit. I can say I don't want to keep anything beyond 30 days. Now, I'm not going to do that because that would be dangerous for me. As well as I can set file size limits. Now, these settings are controlled by the folder or workspace administrator. So if you're just a user or participant in a workspace, you won't have the ability to change these. But the person who is the owner or the workspace administrator, or even if that function is shared between multiple people, then they have the ability to set and change these rules. So I'm going to change this to 5, and I'll apply that. And then I'm going to come out to the folder, and I'm going to look at one of my documents. I'm going to look at document 2 here. Document 2 currently only has one version. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to actually leverage the Vibe desktop. I'll go to my files, and I'm going to load document 2. Now this is an Openoffice. Oh no, this is a Word document. And I'm choosing to do this outside of the Vibe add-in for now, and that's just for demonstration purposes. It'll make it a lot easier to show the updates. So I'm going to add just the word 1 on here. After I do that, I'll force the desktop to synchronize. And you can imagine a lot of this might happen in the background. When I update this document, you see that it just went to version 1.1. If I go back into Word and I add the word 2, and then save that, and then go to the desktop and synchronize. And just for time, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do 3, save it, and then synchronize. You can see some of this is already synchronized in the background without me forcing it. I think the default right now is to sync every minute, but of course, as you can see, you can force it. So right now I'm on version 1.3. If I go back into Word and I save it 2 more times, and then and it has to synchronize, because if it hasn't synchronized in between, then Vibe won't actually know that there's a new version. So for example, if the synchronization timestamp is, if it's scheduled every 5 minutes and I make 5 changes on my local drive, but those 5 changes are done within, say, 2 or 3 minutes, then only the latest version will sync at the time the synchronization is set. So that's one of the reasons why I am forcing the synchronization I am right now. So I'll save that and then do this last synchronization. And then I'll come back to the question, and hopefully with all of this I've answered that question. By refreshing the document, you can see I'm now on version 1.5. When I go back and look at all of my versions, I can see I have my whole version history here. Now if I make one more change on this document, you remember I set the maximum number of versions to 5. And then I go in and I synchronize. I refresh. We can see I'm now on 1.6. When I look at file versions, you see the oldest version here has now changed. So I've just lost version 1.0, and that's because it automatically removes the oldest version of that version line. Now, if I want to say, oh, I'm prepared now to have a new major version, so I'm moving my latest version to be version number 2. So I've now moved it to number 2, and you can see that's reflected. I'm on version 2. I look at my file version history here. We can see everything there. If I now have that document open and I say 7, 2, and I save it, and then synchronize, whoops, and I update. Hope I didn't miss any steps here. Okay, so what that did is that just made version 1.6 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I just updated another one to make sure I'm looking at the right documents. I can actually view this file. I don't want to view this file here. Actually, I'm going to have to view it here. And we'll see which version I'm looking at. And there it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to get rid of that version. Make sure I've got the right one. And then synchronize it one more time. I think I may have skipped a couple of steps here, but hopefully the point is seen. I click on that one more time, and then I look at versions. And so I'm not getting it updated because I updated my version before I modified it. So let me just change that. And I'll demonstrate the rest using the add-in. But what you can see here is that if I have the different settings through that new functionality of document management, I've limited it to 5. I wanted to put a date on here, then those are automatically removed over time. Now, all of the limitations here only apply to one version stream. And what that means is I'm only putting limits on a major version and the supporting minor versions. So as you saw, when I got to file 6, it automatically removed 1.0, but it always kept the latest versions of 1.12 all the way up to 1.5. Once I shift to a new major version, those rules start to apply again at that major version. And we did that because we didn't want to take steps to remove something where somebody had identified a major version as an important step in progressing the nature of the document. So if somebody has said that they're going to move it to a new major version, we're approving and we're supporting that and not removing any old documents through the settings that we have here. And I hope that makes sense. Q, is there a follow-up on that question? I'm not sure if I quite got that all answered right.
I think you got it. I didn't see a follow-up from there.
Okay, well, if there is, just go ahead and please post it. I'm going to move now, and I'm going to look at the same document, but I'm going to do it from Microsoft Word and give you an idea of how the new add-in works. So I've got Word 2010 here. I've installed the add-in. It adds a new ribbon to the Word bar. I've already set up the account that I have under the Accounts option. It works the same way. Once I've identified it, you identify the location that you're linking to, the name you want to give it, and then your credentials. With the Vibe add-in for Office, I have the ability to connect to multiple Vibe systems. So similar to if I'm connecting to multiple mapped drives on a traditional file system. In this case, I'm just connecting to Try Vibe. When I go out and open, I have the same ability to navigate through Vibe that I showed when I was on the desktop and I was syncing folders. So here you can see that I can see my recent places, my personal workspace, my favorites, and my teams. When I click on my teams, I'm going to see the same options I do when I look at my teams out in Vibe. Actually, let me make sure that's expanded. But the key thing here is that this works and works just like a normal file system. I can navigate through this and find files that I might be interested in working with. We are working off of my personal workspace, the Files folder, and we are working on Document 2. And you can see here's the changes that we made previously, and you can also see that it now opens up my Vibe dashboard. Now the Vibe dashboard shows all the previous versions that I was looking at that we did here on this demo. If I go back to version 1.2 and I open it, we can see it goes back to the 1 and 2. Now the great thing as well is that not only can I see the previous versions, but I also have the ability to do other options. So for example, version 2.0 is my latest. If I make a version change here, and we'll just say this is 2.1, and I'll save it, you'll see that the counter right there just went to 2.1. When I go back into Vibe and refresh it, we'll see that the counter just changed to 2.1. If I'm looking at it in HTML, we can see there's the 2.1. I can come in here and I can say this is my comment. And that's posted directly in Vibe. So I come out here and I can see that comment was added. If I want to add a tag, just add a simple tag. If I want to give it a 4-star rating, all of those are saved directly within Vibe. We can see that my tag is added, webinar. My 4-star rating is here. So the great thing about this add-in is it surfaces capabilities with Vibe that are directly shown within Word, and it really simplifies the training for end users. If I click on my name, I can see my quick profile. Back at work, lots to do. If I was to go out in Vibe and go to my personal workspace and update doing a webinar, that's like a microblog, that's like a Twitter feed. And I come out here, it hasn't loaded it, updated it yet. I did a refresh. I haven't actually tested this, so we might be breaking some new grounds here. We're going to see if that, oh, it still doesn't have my refresh, so we'll have to come back to that later. But it would always show the latest update for somebody, as well as all of their credentials. Now, one of the documents that I was working on previously is this one called Document 1. I actually did this at demos at BrainShare and other events. If you look at this comment stream, it's adding all of the comments. If I go back out here in Vibe, go to Files, I look at Document 1, there's a whole lot of comments that are added here. When I was showing this previously, I had everybody in the room just go out and comment while I was doing the demos, and these comments are all being reflected here. Here's a gentleman that made an update from his iPad. I know this particular gentleman's from Austria. Kai is a colleague of mine. He works in Germany. So I can see this stuff directly within Vibe. If I go out and look at those same streams within Word, I go out and look at Kai's name, for example. I click on Kai's name, and I can see his profile that comes directly from Vibe there. If I wanted to get quickly back to the folder where I'm loading these documents from, I just click that the folder and the path there within the dashboard. I have the ability to change the descriptions. So from Lima, that's where I was in South America a few weeks ago, and I could say from Provo. And I know this is all very simple, but I get back into Vibe, refresh the document, and we see there's my from Provo. So what we've really done is tried to take the collaborative capabilities in Vibe, bring them directly into Word, PowerPoint, Excel for Office 2010 and 2007, make it very simple for people to use, as well as give you new capabilities that we haven't had in the past. I've been showing some of the options with getting to previous versions. Some of the other options here, let's go back to that document we were looking at earlier. Okay, and I'm on version 2.1. If I wanted to go in this history, and before I do that, we're going to look in Vibe, whoops, sorry, and I'm going to go back to version or file 2. We'll see that there's no status set here. I also have the ability through the add-in to change the status of a document and any notes that might be attached to it. So I'm going to say this is the official status. If I go back into Vibe and look at that now, we can see that's been updated to official. In Vibe, if I changed it to draft, and then I refreshed things here, when I look at this status, we see that draft is the one selected. I can add notes here within the add-in. So this is, or I should say, these are my changes. Now, a version note is something in Vibe. When you look at the version history, we can see that the version history will include notes. So these are my changes. Now, I can go in and add a note to any previous version. If I'm looking at 1.5 and I look under File Actions, I want to edit the note. I'm going to say, I added my changes and updated punctuation. That's just my note. That way, if anybody's coming in and looking at the file version history, they can see all the notes. If I go back into Word and I do an update, and then I go and look at version 1.5, if I was looking at that note, here's the note that I just did in Vibe. So very nice, very simple. We think it's very intuitive. We've done a lot of testing. We think it's very straightforward. Really enhances the capabilities that people have that Vibe provides, but brings it directly within Microsoft Office. Any questions so far on the Office add-in?
Yeah, let's see. There's a few here. Okay, so we've got, okay, what if two people open a document at the same time with Vibe Desktop?
Oh, excellent, excellent. So all of the changes will be versioned. So Q, if you and I are working on the document at the same time, and I make a modification, then that becomes the new version. And then if you make a modification, then that becomes a new version. So we may have changed the same paragraph, but our changes are not lost. They are not automatically merged, but they are saved. So my changes would be saved, and your changes would be saved. And those changes would be reflected in Vibe when they go to the file versions. It would show that there was a new version, and it would show who modified it. That way, if you and I were stepping on each other, we could easily go back and incorporate those changes. Now, one of the things on that, if those changes were happening while I was in the Vibe Microsoft Office and the add-in is installed, if I have the document open and you've made a modification, then Office will notify me that somebody else has modified the document I'm working on. And then through the Office Merge capability, I have the option to preview the change from the other person, or I have the option to merge the changes. So Q, you and I may have agreed to work on a presentation together, and I'll take the second half and you take the first half, in which case you and I can work on the document at the same time together, and anytime we get a notification that we're doing it together, we know that we can automatically merge it because you and I have agreed to work on two different sections. That's one of the capabilities I didn't touch on that the Vibe add-in provides, which is very nice.
Perfect. Let's see, a few other questions here. Is there a Vibe plugin for Openoffice or Libreoffice?
There is not today. It's on the roadmap, but again, similar to the Microsoft Office for Mac question, it's something that we know we're not going to get to in 2012.
Okay. Let's see. If with the plugin in Office, can you cancel and browse for files on network drives, or are you forced to use Vibe, just Vibe?
All we've done is add a new tab here to the ribbon. If you want to do normal browsing, then you go back to your file and you go under Open, and you can just navigate through the typical network drives that way. So all we've done is just that if you want to work through Vibe, then you use the Vibe tab and you use the Open option here, and then that integrates and works directly with Vibe. If you want to work off of an existing file system, then you would just go to the File menu and open it that way.
Okay, then it looks like a follow-up. What if the versioning time hasn't come up yet?
Meaning the desktop will sync, I think by default it's every 60 seconds. And so if you're made a change and you've saved it to the desktop, then that will automatically get synced back up to Vibe as long as you have an internet connection. So the versioning is always happening in the background as long as you have that internet connection. If I'm using the Vibe add-in, I'm working directly out of Vibe. So anytime I save in the add-in, I'm actually making a version. So look at this document. I'm at 1.2, and here I go 2, and I click Control S. We'll see that went to 2 up here in the corner. If I just do 3 and do Control S again, that goes to 3. So when I'm using the add-in, I'm actually working directly out of Vibe. I'm not doing WebDAV. I'm not syncing. I'm not working off my desktop or anything like that. So all changes are automatically saved as long as that connectivity is there.
Perfect. Let's see. A couple other questions that came through. Any impact to the Windows startup time for Vibe Desktop?
Not that we've seen, no. No, I mean, I'm able to log in right away, and it's very similar to if someone's used iFolder, right? And if you say that you want it to connect at startup, then that just happens very quickly. The only hesitation I would say with that is if you're having any type of access control or login issues. But we have not seen with our testing and feedback that there's been any impact there.
Okay. Let's see, another one that came through is, can you show us the new row feature of the landing pages?
I can't.
Okay.
So I can show you where it would be. How about that? So, because the sandbox is not running hasn't been updated to the new version yet. So where it would be is if you go into Edit the Workspace, and you're in the new landing page editor. This is how the landing page editor looks today. And so if I go and click on one of these rows, I'm changing my table properties here. And currently, table properties are only based on columns. In the new version of Granite, I'll have the ability to have rows defined here. And all that does is just give you more flexibility and control around setting up, configuring, and formatting landing pages. But this is essentially where it would show up.
All right, perfect. Let's see, there's some more questions here. Is it possible to create anonymous surveys?
Anonymous, no, I don't think so. You can create a survey, and the results of the survey would not be posted to anyone else other than the survey owner, but that's probably not what is meant. So I'll have to write that down and follow up, but I'm pretty sure you cannot create a survey and have anonymous feedback. I don't think you can do that today.
Okay. The next one is, will it be more comfortable in the next release to move and copy folders?
Yeah, I'm just taking a note here.
Sure.
Yes, in fact, in this release in version 3.3, I'm not sure what is meant entirely by the question. So we had a problem in our previous releases where if you tried to move and copy folders, say within the same workspace, like you often do on your desktop, if I did a copy and paste on a folder on my desktop, it would just add in to the name of the folder copy of, for example. Vibe previously didn't do that very well, and so it created some headaches for people as they were moving things around. So we've addressed that in Granite, and it basically does the same thing it does on the desktop. It allows you to just copy and paste it. A lot of people will use that as a template for projects that they're doing over and over again, and so we've made it a little simpler and more intuitive to how what they're used to. We've also made some improvements around file moving. So if I go back to what's new in 3.3, not only did we improve some things around the folders, but we added some abilities. It's limited right now to just files and discussion folders. And in the next release called Hudson, we've improved that completely across all folder types. So I think the short answer is yes, but there might be more to the question that I'm not aware of.
All right, and then let's see. Looks like there's a few more. Is there an easy way to migrate files from Groupwise library into a Vibe workspace, one which retains a file extension association?
Yeah, we don't have that today, but we are actively working on it. In fact, we've created a tool that a consultant for Novell is using, and I say consultant means he's in our services team. He's a Vibe expert. He is engaging with customers to build out a process to do that. So it's something that we're actively working on. Depending on where that customer is located, there are partners I know in Europe that are quite good at doing migrations. We have our own consulting services here in the U.S. That can do migrations, but we don't have an automated tool today, but we are working on it.
All right, a couple more. Back to the version. Do autosaves increment the version?
Autosave, if it's, actually I don't know. I would imagine it would.
Okay. All right, let's see. Are there any plans on adding in functionality to tie to other wiki systems other than the built-in one? And then it was IE Media Wiki.
Okay, say that again.
Is there any plans on adding in functionality to tie in other wiki systems other than the built-in one, like Media Wiki?
Yeah, we often use Media Wiki as our guide for features on wikis. In fact, the table of contents feature that was added in this release was modeled after that. We don't have integrations into other wiki systems today, but we are constantly enhancing our capabilities around wikis. So if the question was more about the integrations there, we're not actively doing integrations into other systems, but if the question was more around just functionality, we are absolutely adding more functionality and usability around wikis.
Okay, let's see. And then let's see, there's a couple others here really quick, and then we'll get moving on. What is improved in file management for 3.3?
File management. Most of the file management things that I've talked about are going to be in relationship to the add-in and the desktop. We did some internal testing on the add-in and desktop, and we actually had a little bit of a delay that we weren't expecting. We found a number of issues with the APIs in Vibe, because we were expecting to release the add-in and the desktop in February, last month. When we found these issues on the APIs, we had to go back and fix that directly in Vibe, which actually what prompted us to make some modifications to this 3.3 release. It's actually a little bit more ahead of schedule than we were initially planning, and the focus of this release was really put to be on supporting the add-in and the desktop. We had already made some improvements around landing pages and table of contents and the folder moves that you see here, but much of the work that we were doing at the time really got diverted. If I go to my roadmap slide, really got diverted to the Hudson release. And probably about 4 months from now, we could do another kind of preview for the Hudson release. There's huge usability improvements and look and feel improvements around Hudson, and including some file management capabilities. But when it came to version 3.3, we had to do a little bit of adjustment, and the focus for this release really ended up being around these top two items, the add-in and the desktop.
Perfect. Okay, looks like we have a few more. Are there any suggestions for backup and recovery?
SEP is a good provider today. They support Vibe and many of our other products, and they're the primary ones that I'm aware of. And then I know other people, we have some information in our documentation that describes how you can do a very basic backup and recovery, but those are the two options that I'm aware of.
Okay, let's see. We got another one here. Can users completing forms in a team workspace with WorkForm only see the form they complete, and is there a way for the form to be invisible after approval?
Yes, for sure. So, I'll go to the front of the slide deck here. So if there's anybody on the call that would like to follow up on any of these questions, just email me at trsmith@novell.com. I'll probably divert you to the team that works on the Vibe library, because that's what they do a lot, is really helping people with these types of questions. But you can put a workflow on a form, so once the form reaches a certain state, that workflow can change the access controls. So a great example is, you think of a drop box for students dropping off files or assignments. The folder is open to all students in the class. They fill out the form to provide the assignment to give to the teacher, and as soon as they submit that form, that workflow sends that form to the private folder of the teacher. So the way to do what was asked would be through workflows, and I just gave just a simple example.
Perfect. Then there was an earlier question that was actually in the other session that I thought we'd address in this one. It was just, is it possible to send short messages / emails inside of Vibe, like in Facebook, for example?
No. In fact, if I was to jump to, good segue. So Hudson and Inverness are the names of our 2013 releases. If I was to touch on the overall roadmap, here it is here. Granite is version 3.3. That's the one coming out in May, June. And then Hudson and Inverness are what's planned in 2013. That question relates right here, peer-to-peer messaging. That's one of the areas of focus for 2013. We don't have it yet, but that's what we're going to be adding in. So, you know, maybe that was a Novell employee asking you that question because they know we're doing it. One of the things that we do have that people can leverage is we have an online prototype. And actually, if I go out to my browser, let me close this. This prototype we use to show people our direction on Vibe. We're going to be adding the same capabilities for Groupwise and Messenger. If I go out, no, not there, prototype. If I go out to the prototype, I can see how some of these new integrations are going to work. For example, one of the things we're doing in Hudson is integrating Novell Messenger. So this prototype shows how Messenger will be integrated into Vibe. So here's my contact list. Here's my presence. If I, say, see somebody's name and I want to message them, then I have an instant message dialog. So this isn't peer-to-peer messaging like in Facebook. In this case, it's leveraging Vibe. I mean, not Vibe, but Messenger. But that's coming for both Vibe and Groupwise Web Access in 2013. And we will also provide the ability to message people directly. So when we're looking at the roadmap, peer-to-peer messaging and IM is addressing both of those needs, and that's planned for next year.
Yeah, wonderful, great. That's good news. That's great to see. Let's see, a couple other questions here. Are there any ambitions to create localized versions of examples like German, French for the resource library?
Our team doesn't have the language skill to do that. We are completely open. If the person asking that, say, is a partner, if anyone took the examples that we have on the library and wanted to just put some of those in languages for their local countries, I would be extremely supportive of taking that data. We do a little QA on it, but taking that and making that available out on the resource library as well. We definitely see a pretty big interest in the Germanic area, so Austria, Switzerland, and Germany are very strong for us in Vibe. But that offer applies to anyone who has interest in language. If you see particular demand for a vertical, so for example, the sandbox when I was out here showing on the sample workspaces, and that, let's see if I go back to the workspace, and I click on, which one is it? This one here. So this one which was created for tablets. This is also available for the Dutch market, but they're still working on that. But in that case, it was developed in the Netherlands. But I think that answers the question. And I know, Q, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so.
Yeah, I think we'll have to hold off on any other questions. If there's anything else that we didn't address, I'll forward those on to you, Tracy, and you can answer those offline.
Okay, very good. Do you want me to touch on the last couple of slides?
Yes, that would be great.
So without getting into detail, you can look at what we have planned for 2013. We covered the peer-to-peer messaging and IM. A lot of things we're going to be doing about simplifying the overall message view and experience, making it easier to create groups and quick teams. The question early on about tying into the user's drive, so tying into the file system is a key theme for us. As you can see, some other items there, as well as adding Red Hat server support back end. I talked about integrated chat. That's an overview of the roadmap. And then this slide just gives a summary of some of our core competitive advantages. Outside of the obvious one, which is the last point where we're tightly integrated with Novell Groupwise, the thing that we see and are hearing more and more is that we're very cost effective in getting to a productive state. We're very fast in getting Vibe installed. It can become a very useful tool very quickly. It's easy to create customizations. You don't have to have developers to do it. There's flexible infrastructure and architecture, so you can start small and grow very easily. You can be very effective with Vibe for small teams of 5, 10, 15, 20, all the way up to multiple tens of thousands. And just the overall maintenance cost. The total cost of ownership is a theme that we're hearing over and over again, not only in the depth of capabilities, but how easy it is to set up, maintain, and manage it over time. So that's kind of a very brief view of there. And then, of course, we've got the Vibe resources available, and that, I didn't think we were going to take an hour, but that was good.
Wonderful.